Well, this month I'm pretty excited. I had Meg Greene, today's guest, reach out. Had found Small Town Big Arts online, and one of the things that has been great in doing this work with Small Town Big Arts is that the community of individuals doing work in and around arts in rural spaces becomes a pretty small community ultimately at the end of the day because it's pretty specialized. But I always love when I am able to make a connection with another individual doing work in this space. And Meg Greene was a fantastic introduction. Meg runs the Rural Texas Arts and Culture Network. And so we're going to talk a bit today about rural arts in Texas, the needs in and around the arts in Texas, particularly in rural spaces, and the genesis of this project. So, Meg, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Meg, just to get started, tell us a little bit about you. I want to get to the foundation that is running the network and talk a little bit about the genesis. But tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about how you got into this space where you were doing work to support rural arts and rural artists in Texas.
Yeah, so my background is in theater making. I'm an applied theater artist and a theater educator. And I was working in a lot of different spaces, but my most recent space was working for a domestic violence sexual assault center, and using theater as a prevention tool. So creating plays with young people and then taking them on the road and touring them to middle
Mm.
schools. So really trying to prevent violence, trying to prevent relationship violence, and really promote healthy relationship behavior. So I was in it. I was in an arts organization, well, sexual assault organization, but I was in an arts role,
Yeah.
and really doing more direct service. And um, really enjoyed that for many, many years. And now I've kind of moved into this role that's more of a connector. So all of my work is around bringing people together, helping folks amplify their work, make connections, build community. So
Mhm.
I do that with MindPop in Austin through the Arts Partner community, through the community Creative Learning Initiative. And then
Yeah.
the offshoot, this other portion of work is around doing similar connective work with rural arts and culture orgs. So, as someone who's been really in the work and nonprofits and doing the work on the ground, I'm excited to connect and be the person to help with resources
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
have
Well, you
have
understand the need.
conversations. How do we make this work go, and how do we sustain it? So I'm getting
Yeah.
really excited about that new role. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, Meg, tell us a little bit about Mind Pop and how this program got off the ground.
Totally. So Mind Pop's work in Austin and now nationally is really built on the idea of bringing the power of the arts to the revolutionary power of arts to all students, communities, and schools. So we do that through the Creative Learning Initiative in Austin. So we do professional development with teachers, helping them learn the tools of creative teaching to take in their classrooms and to really activate learning and make it
Hmm.
a dialogic space. And then we work with the arts partners, like I mentioned, really making sure that they have access to teachers, schools, so that they can bring artists in residence, field trips, workshops,
Awesome.
and really bringing arts into students' day-to-day life. Um, and then the rural work kind of grew out of relationships that we had with donors. So
Hmm.
funders were coming to us and saying, okay, we really want to support arts and culture in rural Texas, but we don't know what's out there. Like,
Mm.
how do where is that information? Like, is there a
Yeah.
hub? Where is that? And there wasn't. There's nothing that brought together comprehensively across the state these folks.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we started with a research study. And that was to get into like the nuts and bolts, because people do have this question. We worked from the 1099 tax forms. So
Oh, smart.
anyone who like checked arts and culture uh, was put in this big list for us. And then we took that and analyzed that. And we really looked at what our budget sizes, how many staff do folks have, who are they serving across what areas. And then we did some interviews with executive directors and folks who are really on the ground doing the work and championing it in their communities. And so based on all of that, the spark for the rural network was born.
I love that. You know, what, Texas is a huge state.
Huge.
Geographically, it's massive.
Yes.
I could come up with or imagine why it was that there were members of your donor community they were interested in rural communities, but what was sparking that interest? What apart from
Well,
my
some of our
speculation of it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So absolutely. So if you don't know much about Texas, maybe here's a little geography and economics lesson, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So okay, Austin is in the middle of the state. El Paso is far west Texas. It is on the border, right?
Hmm.
From Austin to El Paso is the same distance as from Washington, D.C. to Portland, Maine.
Oh wow, that really gives, as a person on the East Coast, that
Right.
really gives me a sense of
Right.
size. Yeah, that is a great.
State. So
That's
it's a
crazy.
expansive, diverse, community and space.
Yeah.
Um, so um, we, oh my gosh, I lost track of your question. Sorry.
Well, we were kind of talking about the
Yep.
the genesis that the donors would sort of say, "Hey, we want to know what's
Oh,
out there."
yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I was talking about, so a lot of foundation money comes from things like cattle and oil and farming, right? So
Hmm.
that's a big part of our economic driver in Texas, and especially rural Texas. So some of those foundations, their family roots are really in like the oil industry, right? And so they want to
Hmm.
give back to small towns, to rural spaces that really fed them and that,
Okay.
their families thrived and that they have beautiful memories of living there. So that's one of the connections from a specific donor I'm thinking of.
Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Um, how do you all define rural? In these conversations I have with folks, that it can. It's a broad term. It can mean lots of
Yeah.
different things, from population size to culture to location. There's towns, there's counties. How do you
Yeah.
all, in a Texas context,
Yeah.
define rural?
Good question. So, for the initial research study, because we were pulling those forms and we needed a really standard definition, the best one we came up with at the time, this is from the 2020 census, was the USDA RUCA codes. So, that stands for Rural Urban Commuting Area.
Mm,
And that code defines, to get really granular about it, it defines rural as a town or an area of less than 5,000 population
wow.
with less than 2,000 housing units. So it's pretty small.
Yeah.
And we use that really for the beginning of this research. But since then, as the network has evolved and become not just the research, we're expansive and we are really welcoming folks who are rural or rural serving, right? Because
Hmm.
some
Hmm.
communities are the only thing in their area and they're serving everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we started with that very specific definition for purposes of the research, and then now
Well,
we've
that's interesting though to discover that it needed. I think it's great because I think you have to start somewhere, right? You have to have some sort
right.
of definition. I mean, there's been points where I've just worked off population size, but that can be a little bit deceptive too
Right.
because when we think about micropolitan areas, like you can live in a town, but you identify within a county, or even in some circumstances surround multiple counties. So,
Absolutely.
it is so specific to where a place is, so broadening out makes a lot of sense because there could be populations and people sort of missed in that. Um,
Hmm.
that's interesting too that people are and organizations are gravitating to you even when they were falling outside that
Yeah.
framework. With that, what are some of the core problems that in rural Texas for rural Texas arts organizations that is having them draw to you, that's saying, hey, there is a resource there. We identify as rural. We need something. What are their core problems? What are they facing?
Yeah, so what came out of our research and our conversations with leaders in rural areas was our three things. So they were really well known in their town. and sometimes maybe in their county, right? But
Hmm.
then outside of their region, they didn't have much visibility. And that's meaningful to like the public, but also funders. Like they felt like
Yep.
people didn't know what they were doing. So visibility was a huge one. Then there was the aspect of connecting to other folks doing similar work. So a lot of folks were saying, we know our counterparts in urban areas. Like I've got my friend I can call from college who's at, that theater,
Mhm.
but I don't know who I can call who's in a town of 2,400 who has an art gallery, who are an art museum. Who can I call that
Yeah.
can speak to that context? So they were really craving like connecting with people who had similar community sizes, similar circumstances, and being able to make those connections. Um, then the third piece was around sharing resources. So, rural folks are used to having smaller staff sizes,
Hmm.
smaller volunteer pools. They're used to having perhaps less resources to serve a lot of people, right? To do
Yeah.
an amazing amount of work. And the conversation was really how can we pool our resources so that we can do more work and we can amplify everybody? And also, how can we gain more resources, professional development, new skills to feed our work, especially when we're maybe a staff of one?
Yeah.
So I'm a staff of one, I've got a board of 16, and they're a working board of volunteers. How do we learn more, do more, connect with what else is happening? So it was really
Yeah.
about visibility, connecting with folks, that networking piece, and then sharing resources.
Yeah, and it was really serendipitous connecting with Meg right now because I'm working on a project for the state of Virginia that is trying to accomplish these same goals.
Mm,
And we haven't talked about it directly yet, but how does this network manifest? Well, the network manifests through an online hub, which is it is the real beauty of modern technology, which can be complex, particularly for those of us in the arts. But suddenly now the potential for people to connect across vast space that would be the distance between Portland and Washington,
mm,
D.C. That ability to connect, to meet, to see each other, to create visibility. The online space is a really great tool in that regard. And so you all have created this online hub. What I know some of this is going to double back to what you were just talking about in terms of the needs,
right,
but walk me through the online hub. What are the key components and how do
right.
organizations utilize it?
Yeah, so again, it was born out of those funders saying, if only we had a place where we could see it
Hmm.
all. So the hub kind of came about in two phases. The first one was really taking all of that research, so all of those organizations, which is about 1,000-ish, um, and making profiles for them on this website. So it became this outward-facing directory where funders could click on their area and see, oh, this is everyone in my region. Or they could say, our funding area really supports, history museums. Let's see who's out there.
Yeah.
And so they could navigate according to their county, they could navigate according to budget size or art form, region, all those pieces. And so that was the first phase, this really outward facing visibility for rural arts and culture orgs. So, we were using that. We were sharing about it at our amazing partners, Texas Rural Funders. We were presenting to that consortium of funders. We were sharing it with, if we got a call from someone in East Texas saying, hey, I'm at, the TLL Temple Foundation. Can you talk me through, you know, show me this website and talk to me about who's in my area or send me a
Yeah.
list? We were able to make those connections of like, yeah, I will absolutely pull a list of all the folks in your area. Here it is. And just doing that sharing. Um, and then the second part of the website really came about as what you're talking about is that kind of the hub for folks to land, like that extra space, that virtual space to bring us together. So the Backsides audience is really the network. So it is a login only area where folks from the network can claim their profiles on that public
Mm.
facing side.
Okay.
Uh, and then they can edit it. So they can add pictures, they can add their website, their social media, they can adjust their mission statement or add more context for what they do. So they can really use that as a site of storytelling for their org. And they can edit that at any time. So that was kind of the password protected piece of like owning their space
Yeah. Okay.
or their profile. And then it has a few other features. So we've got a resource library there. So all of our virtual convenings, which we haven't talked about yet, but
Yeah.
all of
And we're definitely going to get to that.
yes.
Yeah.
All of the videos of those presentations are stored there and slide decks. And then we have links to external partners like Texas Rural Funders Grants Hub, and other resources in this community. And then the third piece was a discussion board. So on that discussion board, folks can propose topics, they can respond to topics and threads that are already there.
Hmm.
Yeah. So those are kind of the different pieces of the
Yeah.
web.
And we had Meg and I had a conversation ahead of this, and I was talking about how I had created a discussion board on small town big arts, and it really failed. And I'm not completely sure why that was, but it was really clear that, and it was born out of actually a group of rural arts organization leaders who I had been. Instructing in an online course, and they had said, "Hey, we really want this conversation to continue, and let's create a discussion board." So I set it all up, I put it out there, and it sat, and I would prompt occasionally, but nobody would really respond. But what you shared with me that has been really successful is the digital video. I'm not sure if it's Zoom or Meetup or whatever the platform is, but that those seem to be working. So tell me about how you all are delivering these sort of live synchronous events for folks, and why you think
Right.
that's the thing that
Yeah.
curious too, why you think that's working when my discussion board has failed.
Not the only one. You're not the only one. You know, I think at the base level, people want to be together. They want to be together. They
Yeah,
want to learn from each other. They want to connect with each other. And we do regular old Zooms. We are not a webinar. We are not, slick. You know, the
sure.
point is that we are on, if we're able to be on cameras, because broadband access is tricky in rural areas,
Hmm.
but sometimes you have people join from their phone and their computer so they can have their camera on their phone and but if they can be on camera, they can be on camera. We want to see people. We want to hear them. We want them to come off mute. We want them to be in the chat. Um, and so we're just like regular old Zoom calls, and we do kind of a learning series, which can take the form of, workshops on elevator pitches or panels on foundation giving, or we just had one on the hotel occupancy tax
Ah,
in Texas and how that those funds can be earmarked to support arts and culture and how different towns do that. Because some folks like feed it into like an arts council type thing, and then that person grants out, things, or
yeah,
sometimes folks directly, anyway, apply to their government. So, we have these kind of virtual learning series. We've got something called Coffee and Connection, and that's just like the most informal, like bring your beverage,
yeah.
right? Let's connect, let's just chat, no agenda. Um, and those have been surprisingly well attended. Like I was like, I don't know, does anyone want to just hop on a Zoom where there's no agenda? And the answer is yes. Like
Okay, yeah,
the
yeah,
answer is yes. And often it's similar folks. Like I get new people every time, but there are some standards who are like so excited to sit and chat and like really like bring whatever's on their mind that week or a challenge they're having. Um, and then kind of the third format we're playing with right now is something called jam sessions. And that format is like we have a topic, we have something we're all working on. So the first one we just did was crafting effective surveys. And our goal was
hmm,
like maybe people will bring surveys they're working on and we can like pull them up and look at them and help them through that. And what it turned out to be more of was people who this topic was on their mind and they wanted to talk about it and they wanted to like think about it in community, but they didn't necessarily like, they didn't bring homework, like quote unquote, right? They're like, can we all
yeah.
just have a room and talk together? And it was really beneficial because we were able to hear what everyone's doing, challenges everyone's having, and be in community in that way. So we've found like in these three virtual formats that folks are excited to be there. They're excited to connect with others. They're excited to hear speakers. They're excited to be in community.
Hmm.
And we we also like the other piece of that kind of Zoom format is we always make sure to have community building time in there. So there's always some kind of
Oh,
breakout
nice.
room where maybe they're having a discussion, or maybe there's a opening, like Priya Parker calls them magical questions. So maybe there's a magical
Yeah.
question and we like get in a small group and we all talk about it. And then we come back and we've like connected and warmed the room and we're primed to have an awesome conversation or watch a speaker. So it's not just a sit and get, right? We're
Yeah.
really trying to show up for each other and meet new people and be there together.
Well, that shows too where your theater artist background comes, comes in useful,
Just a
right?
little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah. But I do think that that is an important thing for folks to hear, as we're, trying to convene and bring people together, that those tools are really useful tools. And I'm trying to soak this up right now as we're attempting to do this in Virginia. Virginia it's going to be interesting going through this because this is my guess. I don't live in Texas, but from talking to you and hearing this, it does sound like the private funding landscape is probably a bit more robust than it is in the state of Virginia. It's just my guess from what I'm sort of hearing. So, the visibility piece I think is going to be important, but we're also trying to help these organizations kind of establish some, internal tools and resources they can use within their own communities. One question I have about that, because I'm kind of thinking about, and I'm sure this comes up. I don't think that, rural Texas is probably, money isn't growing on trees necessarily, um, but in some cases it would be coming out of the ground, I'm sure. But you know what I mean. The how do you keep, I find very often when I'm in spaces right now with arts organizational leaders that it can be a negative space, because people are under a tremendous amount of pressure. It's really difficult to do what they do. They can articulate why, and they can articulate the joy of it. Um, how do you how do you keep those convenings forward moving and positive and not becoming a space where people, and I think it's okay too if it's occasionally people just need to vent and share and commiserate, but how does it move beyond that? Because sometimes I feel that in these conversations people can kind of get locked into just talking about how they don't have enough, and they can't get done what they need to get done, and they're stressed and they're tired. How do you navigate that?
Mm. It's a good question. I'm trying to think if I have like a specific example that I can land on to share or to move through. I think so in the coffee and connections format, that's way more of that informal space. And we have one person who comes and she has the consistent issue that she brings up with every group. And I think it's really interesting because she's like really trying to work through it. And
Yeah.
she, every time she brings it up, she's talking about attendance, and she has a small theater in, I think it's called George West. And they are just trying to expand their audience and trying to get folks to come in, right?
Hmm.
And so she always brings the question of like, how do you get new people in your theater? How do you get new people to engage? And I
Yeah.
find it really interesting because she's approaching it from like a, how do we do this? And she's asking almost every time. Like she brings it up
Yeah.
and it feels like people are interested in that conversation. And sometimes it is like a, yeah, we're struggling with that too. And I think that's just as valuable because
Just
it's
to hear
the
somebody else is
I
dealing with it
see
too. Yeah.
you. Yeah, I hear
Yeah.
you. Like, that's really tough. And like, here's something we tried, like flyers at the soup kitchen next door. Maybe try that. Right. So like we're
Yeah.
seeing some of those, where it's like a, I see you, I hear you. And like we're able to kind of also reflect back some successes
Yeah.
that are exciting. Um, so that's kind of one of the examples I'm
Yeah, no, I
thinking.
think that makes sense though, right? I think, if you can frame it through, hey, this is this opportunity for us to be seen and heard, because we
Yeah.
can we can be in these spaces and feel like we're somehow personally failing. And
Right.
to hear that others are navigating the same challenges, can be really relieving, that you,
Right.
you are not alone. This is
Yeah.
happening to many of us. Um,
Hmm.
And yeah, it makes sense to me that because that's the thing you can't. Right, when you're seeing and talking to people, it's very different than like entering something on a discussion board where you sort of drop something in and walk away from it, and you're not able
Right.
to kind of, I mean, you can get a sense that other people, or somebody
Mhm.
sees it and they're like, oh, yeah, me too, but they're not saying it.
Yeah,
So, and they may not
exactly.
even want to engage in it because it's like, oh, God, yeah, I don't want to think about this right now or whatever. But when you're in real space and real time, or not real space, but real time with people, then it really does make sense. What is we talked a little bit about background too, and this has been a for you, originally um, you originally grew up in the suburbs, correct?
I
And
did.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
outside of Cincinnati.
yeah, which is most people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I was in a presentation yesterday talking about the United States population, and it's something like 65% of people live in
Hmm.
outlying areas of major metros. And what has been the most surprising or interesting to you that you have found in this rural arts network that maybe initially you wouldn't have thought or, wouldn't have occurred to you?
Hmm. Maybe it's like the jaded urbanite in me, but sometimes like there's like this go, go, go nature of urban spaces where, networking opportunities are like, I could go to that. But like I know
Yeah.
my people, like it's just not. It's not a necessity um to do the work, right? Which I'm saying there's someone who literally pulls people together and asks people to come to my networking things all the time. But that's what I find is like people get busy and they're like, but I have to go do programming or there's an emergency with a teaching artist and I actually can't because now I'm in a classroom, right? Like there's a more optional nature or like it's one of a long list of things.
hmm
And what I'm finding is like I mentioned, those coffee and connections. I was like, I don't know, let's try this. Let's just do another engagement that's not so like everyone log onto your Zoom. Like it's
Yeah.
not so like structured. And I was really surprised by that, Jeff. The first one I was like, no one's gonna come and I'm just gonna be sitting here with my like cute coffee cup, like, hi, you know, no one's gonna be here. And five people came. I was like,
Yeah.
What? Like our first convening that was a virtual panel with funders had 12 people, and I had five people come to this networking call.
Yeah.
And it just struck me of like how much of a desire that is just to
Yeah.
connect,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though they are just as busy as urban folks, because sometimes they're the only one on their team. And
Yeah.
they might be a teaching artist running all over the county, and then they get back and they have to do budgeting and administrative work and coordinate with volunteers, right? So, like, it's just a difference in maybe a need or a difference in a desire to connect deeply with other people across the state. So, that was surprising.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? When you're sort of I mean, plus you're very often, I would imagine this would really be the case in Texas. It's certainly the case in rural Virginia. You have a smaller community, so you tend to be more widely networked with the community at large. That
Mhm.
is true, but you're physically very often in isolation. So
Yeah.
just due to where very often you're going to live on a piece of land that is expansive, and
Mhm.
the next person's pretty far away. Even your organization may sit somewhere where people are traveling to it from a wide area. So I could see the need, because you're right. I can tend to be extraordinarily cynical about gatherings, right?
Hmm.
And every chamber of commerce thing, but I will say at the same time, for those in arts organizations, you must go to those things. I just want to say really quickly,
Yes.
I
It's very important.
yeah, you really have to, even though there are times where you're going to sigh and you're going to go, oh God, I've got to get another card from a financial advisor or realtor or whatever. But at the same time, that is how you build connectivity and communities that are going to be essential to your value proposition, how you built the organization. So go to those things. But Um, I will say, even living in a community of about 100,000, I tend to be very cynical about those events. But I also
Great.
love, I don't know, I love hearing about these convenings too, because I was on a convening yesterday that was a national convening where they were trying to do what you're describing, but somehow it was just missing the mark because
Mm,
there was A, so many people on the call.
yeah.
So it just became like I just had these people sort of like playing music and like going like this to me on a screen. And for those listening, I just kind of did a shaking motion. But
Some gestures.
yeah. And you know, and I it was just like something's missing here. I loved what they were trying to do, and I loved what was
Right.
going on in it, but I was just like, yeah. And so when they did breakout rooms, I totally just I exited because I was just like, I'm out of here. And I think in listening to this, I do think there is something about probably the scale too that's actually really helpful in like people
Yeah.
getting out of it what they actually need out of it, as opposed to
Yeah.
this sort of wider thing.
Yeah. I mean, we do not have like 100 people,
Yeah, but I think that's great though, you
yes.
know?
And you get to see people and you get to hear people's voices, and
Yeah.
people will come off of mute. And, like maybe we've had like 30 at the most. And then I know people like watch it later because I can see that they've watched it on the watch counts. But, you know, it's actually like the magic sauce. Like that is a good number because people don't feel invisible. Because
Yeah.
my favorite thing to do now is to go to Zoom, professional developments and to see how people facilitate because it's
Yeah.
like, how do you create a space where folks feel like they aren't invisible and they aren't looking at their other screen and checking their email, but they're like in it. They're locked in. They're like with you, right? If you ask them to answer a question, they've been listening. Because it's tricky. The format
Yeah,
is
because you have
really
to be
tricky.
accountable, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And as a host, you have to be very on, like,
Yeah.
because also you're like, we've now worked out our format that maybe this is a good cautionary tale for Zoom things, but like people are still like Zoom bombing. That's still happening. Like we were putting all of our events on Eventbrite and you can make
Whoa.
them public. Yeah, yeah. You can make them public. And I was like, well, yes, because we don't want access issues. I want people to find
Oh.
us, right? And so it's public. So you get spammers who sign up and then they get the information and then they come in and they start wreaking havoc. And it
Huh.
because our yeah, our permissions are pretty tight. So we keep, but there was one time where they were like asking for permission to I am taking you into this story. I'm going for it. Do you want it?
Yeah, I do actually, because this is really interesting to me. So for
Okay.
everybody to know too, this is like half podcast, half like lessons for me as I'm setting
Okay.
things up.
Great.
And I
Lessons from the
literally was
field.
just building out the part of the Sarah website that has the meetings,
Yeah.
and it populates a button to join the
Yeah.
Zoom publicly. So this is actually really great to hear
No, don't
this.
do that. Don't do that. My
Okay.
cautionary tale is this, the beautiful lesson. Thank you, spammers. Was that, because it was public and because I linked the Zoom through the Eventbrite, they got it immediately. So everyone who signed up got the Zoom immediately. And then, I was getting these people, and what they would do is they would change their name to a name of a host, but they'd have their camera off. And so like, Melanie from TL Temple is facilitating, or is speaking on this panel, and she's messaging me on the side like, Meg, there's another Melanie in this room and it's not me. And I'm like, that is so weird. Okay, thank you for letting me know. And
Wild.
so and then they started asking to like record to their computer. Like Melanie wants to record. I'm like, that's so weird. I'm recording this for the network. Why would she need that? So, and they start doing it so that you get like a bunch of pop-ups on your screen and you're like trying to facilitate a gathering. Like I'm facilitating a panel and it's like in my face.
Whoa.
So anyway, we've worked through that.
So
I
how do you
no
safeguard it?
longer
Sorry, this is how do you safeguard it
no,
now?
I know this is the worst. Like we did have to take them off of them being public on Eventbrite.
Yeah,
I do not link my Zoom to my Eventbrite. So I will send out the Zoom link a day or two before. So
in an email.
and I read through my list. So now that it's not public, it only goes through our newsletter and our website, which I've caught a couple folks. So the tell that I have is it's usually like initials. Like they won't put a first name or it'll be like Mary C or like Z and some, like it's
Oh.
kind of obvious. It's like someone hasn't gone through the process of like signing up for the event, right? And then the emails, I've started to recognize some emails and I'm like, that's not real. But
Wow.
cautionary tale. And and now I always have a tech person who's ready to handle that and is not me. I'm like, okay, I have my colleague who's here and is like ready to put anyone who's questionable in the waiting room and kick them out or just like remove them.
Oh
But
man. That
cautionary
was
tales.
actually that was really helpful because I would say for anybody, trying to create any kind of convening, right, to know that can happen
Yeah.
is really helpful. Yeah, so it's been, as I've been building, this is good timing because I've been begun to build out the web components and looking at things. What are you finding are the resources that organizations and individuals are most interested in? I could probably guess what it is, but
I bet you could write them down and we could just, yes. So grants,
yeah,
funding,
yeah,
funding, and
yeah,
funding,
yep,
and
yep.
funding. Um, and so that's really a broad one we're getting a lot of. But then things like, uh, how do you recruit qualified staff to rural areas? How do you
Mm,
pay competitively and what is competitive in a rural area? So like salary study type stuff, because some folks, I think it's TCG does the salary studies. Like there are things out there, but
yeah,
they don't apply.
yeah, yeah.
They
It's
don't
just a
apply in the same
totally
way.
different market. Yeah, it just doesn't make, yeah.
Absolutely. So things like that, things like right now everyone's interest is around collaborating with municipalities and trying to figure out like how do we work with our town? What does that look like? What can they offer us? What can we ask for? How do we build those relationships? So that's kind of going to be our next convening is really gelling around those ideas.
Yeah.
Storytelling. How do I tell my rural story? Or how am I in Lufkin, Texas, and we're barely 50,000, but we're completely surrounded by rural areas and we're the only thing in the area. So
Yep.
like we're
And
not,
everybody comes there. Yeah.
yes, we're not like rural by definition, so that means we're like knocked out for a bunch of grants, but like we that is true. That is our story and that is who we're serving. So there's things like that where it's like yeah, how am I telling my story in a specific rural area? How am I rural adjacent and like and still helping people understand my context?
Hmm.
So those are some of the big things that folks have been marinating on.
As this pilot program we're working on, we are starting on a section of Virginia, which is called South Side. It's essentially like southern central part of the state, and I a little bit familiar with it, but it's been great. I've been interviewing organizations there as we're getting ready for our first real world convening. So we are going to go and
Mhm.
sort of
Yeah.
bring them in, and we're going to have because the Virginia Commission for the Arts is funding this initiative, and it really is sparking from some of their needs and desires. One of the things that I am sort of inadvertently finding, or that I'm happy about, is going to happen is that some VCA staff is going to be attending, and I think there's going to be an opportunity for them to hear from these individuals too some of the barriers for them that exist to the VC, to access
Right.
VCA funding and
Mhm.
support. Um, have you found that that there is obviously the individuals, the funders interested in sort of identifying and finding these organizations within the state, but has it been informative in the other direction too? Is there a feedback that's happening that helps?
Yeah. I think one of the things I'm noticing the most, because we've done two foundation panels and one government grant panel. So that was like Texas Commission or oh my gosh, Texas Commission on the Arts and then NEA, right? So that one was like
Hmm.
more national and state. What I'm noticing the most is people, I would say me included, feel like the people on the other side of the table are like so far away from us and like we can't ask questions and it's like a transactional relationship. And I
Yeah.
think the thing that has helped our network the most is realizing these are real people, especially folks at foundations. And
Mhm.
I will say our state agency, like they want to talk to you. They want to give you feedback on your grants. They want you to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
The best quote I've heard from Melanie at Temple was like, all of these are worthy, right? You are all worthy of getting money. And we just have to make choices on our priorities as a foundation, but that doesn't mean you're not worthy, right?
That's a great
So,
thing for a funder to say, actually. That is a
yeah.
rare thing to say you're all. That's nice.
And
That's
hearing that and
yeah,
saying, like, you all are doing amazing work. We want to hear from you. We want to answer your questions. We, you know, we want to be part of that feedback loop. Um, the folks at Abilene Community Foundation were amazing as well, talking about that. Like they had a rural grant line. Um, and that grant manager was like, please talk to me. Like, I want to help you. I want to think through things with you. I want to, I want to make your proposal as strong as it can be.
yeah,
And I think that turned the tables of I'm advocating for you versus you are applying to me and I'm just like judging your application. And it felt more like we are open, we're interested, we're excited because
yeah. We want to
we
get this to you.
yes, like we have these funds and we want
Yeah,
these funds to find the folks who really need them and who can do great things and serve their community. And so I think that like giving faces and even email addresses to these people to our network, like that has demystified and that has built some relationships and maybe reframed a little bit of like them feeling closer to the folks who are on the other side of that table.
yeah, yeah. That's great. And something I'll definitely take away. Well, I think as we wrap up, and this has been a great conversation, Meg, tell me what's next? What's next for the network? What are you thinking, right? You've established connectivity to communities, you've built a database, you've got resources for folks. What's the next step?
Yeah. So last July, we hosted our first in-person convening, which was a collaboration with Preservation Texas on the creative reuse of old buildings.
Mm,
So really, really thinking about the intersections of, because you can get funding for all of those historic renovations and things like that, and then you have a big, beautiful building, and how do you bring it to becoming a community hub or resource that your community needs? So we did that convening, and it was amazing. And we had a lot of rural folks come and we did a special happy hour for rural, the network afterwards, and people were just so excited to be together. And they were like, okay, but when's the next one? I was like, you want another one on this topic? And they're like, but when's the next one?
yeah, yeah,
For us, it's really, as we headed into this strategic planning year and this budget year, we made an intentional choice to um, really earmark funds to do in-person work. So we are collaborating with Texas Folklife and Texans for the Arts. So we've got an in-person convening in we call it the RGV here, but it's the Rio Grande Valley, South Texas, very South Texas. And so we'll be doing, grants and storytelling workshop with them in person. And then TBD, we have one more regional convening we're going to be
yeah.
planning, but we're definitely trying to find those touch points while our state is ginormous. So we're trying to
Yeah, that was
figure out
my
how
next
to.
question, right? Because I think about just Virginia, and I'm thinking like, okay, we have Nova, Northern Virginia, we have sort of Chesapeake kind of region. Then we have the little arm that goes out from the state, which is essentially Tennessee and Kentucky, right? And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
about how people will be like, oh man, I'm all the way up in Northern Virginia, I
yeah,
can't travel down to. But I mean, so these
yeah,
in-person communities, which does make sense as the total next step,
right.
um, is the approach going to be to try to hit things regionally within Texas? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, and we've been working with partners. So, like I said, Texans for the Arts and Texas Folk Life, and then, we are gonna go hang out in West Texas, and they have a Texas Rural Philanthropy Days, and so we're gonna collaborate with them just to get the word out. Like, we're probably not gonna be hosting anything, but like. So there are some where it's like regional convenings and some where I'm still traveling to like a conference or something and collaborating on just to try to get the word out, build relationships, but then we've got our designated convenings too. So working with partners has been so
Yeah,
valuable.
the partner thing is, I think about too, because Virginia, it's actually been gone since COVID, but it's coming back. The Virginia Commission always did an annual conference called Our Works in Richmond.
Yeah,
And even thinking about like, oh, we could hitch to that, too, occasionally,
exactly.
where we're a breakout on that.
Right. Yeah, and that's been so helpful. Like Texas Rural Funders has been a great partner. Community Foundation of Abilene hosted something called Spur. And so it was
Mm.
Ooh, I'm killing. I actually can't remember the acronym right now, but
It's
it
a
was the
very
same idea.
clever though when you think
I
about Texas.
know.
It's very clever. That's very
Yeah,
clever.
yeah. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but again, it's like it was like the West Texas Rural Philanthropy Days, which what they do is they bring together nonprofits and they give them a bunch of workshops around like fundraising, events, storytelling, elevator pitches, right? So they give them a bunch of tools, and then the second day there are funders there, and they do roundtables with them. So I don't know if you guys have anything like this in Virginia, but so they will have, a table with TL Temple Foundation. I keep using Melanie
That's
as an
great.
example, but she's an amazing partner. She wasn't actually there, but they'll have these different foundations at tables, and the nonprofits will give their pitch. And then they kind of rate them on like how
Oh, that's
likely
great.
we would be to fund your project. And so they're walking away with real context, and they're like, oh, well, a Gwendolyn rated me green. So I'm gonna follow up with her and I'm gonna,
Yeah.
pitch. So it's a really cool format. And so they replicated that up in like, oh my gosh, it's like Upper West Texas, not quite Panhandle, but totally different area than
Yeah.
West Texas, closer to the border. So um yeah, so just working with those partners to be at those events and to hand out our materials and to talk to people and get to connect and be a part. And for me, it was I want to connect with the attendees because they're a rural, but then I got to connect with those funders and say, hey, have you heard of our website? I'd
We've
love to
got
talk you
this
through it.
resource. Come look at it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
which is great. I mean, I think every state is going to be different in terms of that landscape, and wherever, one is, I would say if it seems like that could possibly be happening in your state, look for it. We sadly in Virginia don't have anything like that. And sadly, some of that is also too, there's not a lot of private foundations. I mean, there are some, but they're also,
okay.
regionally or, located within a city like, in
Right.
Virginia, there's a lot in Richmond, but they're going to fund things in Richmond, right? And
Yep.
um
Totally.
and they might do it I will say though too, they may do it in the cities though too. So be on the lookout if you're an outlier, there may be an opportunity there.
Right.
Well, Meg, this has been really helpful. I'm so happy to have connected. And
Yeah.
if you would share the where folks can find the network and see all the great things that you're doing.
Yeah, so it's texasruralarts.org, and you can check that out. And you can also access our events on that page. So that's available to folks. And if it applies to you, you're interested, join us. Like, no problem.
Yeah, how do you feel
Um,
about if somebody showed up from New Hampshire on there? Would you
we have had a few folks from different areas show up, and I'm like,
yeah.
sometimes I may be able to connect with them, and sometimes I'm not because I'm curious. I'm like, okay, is this topic interesting, or are you trying to do something similar, or are you like me and you're checking out like the Zoom PD? It's gone down since we've taken it off of like the public on Eventbrite, but yeah,
Yeah.
no, we were happy to have folks join us because I feel like, what's exciting for me is what you were saying of like, I want to connect with other people doing this work because while right now our speakers have been primarily Texas based, I think it's so valuable to hear what folks are doing across the country and rural
Yeah.
areas and learn from each other because,
Well, and
what
your
are you
story
doing
about
over
finding the
there?
audience, right? I mean, I just spoke to a little community in Clarksville, Virginia, and they asked the same question, right? So
Yeah,
it's a universal question.
it is.
It's a universal question. Well, Meg, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, and definitely check out the network. They've done a fantastic job of creating a really fantastic resource for the state of Texas, and as we discussed, really beyond. So thank you so much, Meg.
Yeah, thank you.
It can be difficult to find resources for arts organizations, artists, and civic leaders looking to promote the arts in smaller communities. Small Town Big Arts is a podcast for those looking to boost the arts in rural and small town America. From the mountains of Kentucky to the Alaskan coast, each episode speaks with leaders in the field successfully navigating issues of fundraising, waning board engagement, local politics, and employee and volunteer retention. If you are in a community with less than 100,000 residents and the arts are important to you, find our monthly episodes by searching Small Town Big Arts.